Hey everybody, it's Joseph Varghese here from PeerMomentum, and I'm here engaging and interviewing with my friend Tom Martin. Tom's been a friend of mine for over a decade at this point, and he is someone who I would say is a master in the area of relationships. He's a connector in so many ways. He's a storyteller. His Tom runs a media company called Tom Martin Media. He's a PR coach, PR expert, and well, Tom, why don't you share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into our topic, which is basically about how to love your customers, how to create raving fans with your customers. So, why don't you share a bit more about yourself and what you're up to?
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Joseph. It's great joining you here. I'm excited about the whole Blab concept. I'm kind of new to this, but I'm very excited about the opportunities we'll have to connect with others and share information with everyone. Yeah, exactly. As you said, I've been in the public relations field for about 10 years now. Prior to that, I spent many years as a television news producer, working with Diane Sawyer, Charlie Rose, and broadcasters like that. And these days in my PR practice, I spend a lot of time working with authors and speakers and experts. And one of the key things I'm telling just about every client I work with is to remind them to focus on others. You know, it's so tempting when we have a few minutes of free airtime on a television station or what have you to, start talking about the awards we've won and why we're the best at this or that. But I found that really focusing on the other people is really the key to success. I mean, it feels good. I think we all, get satisfaction out of serving others, being supportive and delivering value. But it's also, I think, the most effective way to grow a business also. So, when you invited me to join you for a Blab as we head into Valentine's Day weekend here, I thought that the topic of love your customers would be a very good way to go. So again, thanks for inviting me to join you.
Of course, I think it's a great topic too for this holiday season. I find that there are more entrepreneurs in the world now than ever before, and people often approach me, and I'm sure they approach you also. But how to really make it as an entrepreneur? And the fact is, most businesses fail after 5 years, and most entrepreneurs, as many entrepreneurs I know, eventually give up the path of being an entrepreneur and they go back into the work world. And what I get from talking to these people is that that one element of serving their customers, really making them raving fans by providing value and listening, is often missing in how they approach entrepreneurship. And I love to talk about that. And I think in terms of Valentine's Day is obviously we talk about relationships and dating. And I'm looking forward to Valentine's Day with my wife and my baby girl this Sunday. I think in terms of Valentine's Day, though, to take that concept of love and bring it forward to your customers now, it really takes it to the next level, I'd say. And we can talk about that further, and we can talk about ways that like strategies that you know of, that you can share, things you've done before or you've learned from your clients on how they connect, engage with their customers. Love to kind of hash out different strategies and things that you've learned, and I'll be happy to share some of my own experiences too as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, I love the subject, and seriously, it is at the core of everything that I do and the way that I always seek to serve my customers and my clients in the PR world. It's funny, as you were just giving us a little setup there, I was thinking of, you're probably familiar with the, I don't know if you call him a motivational speaker or sales coach, Jeffrey Gitomer, who writes those wonderful little colorful books with cartoons and whatnot. And he's very, very funny, very, very humorous guy. And I remember one of his lines was, that so many companies just sort of think of their customers as a number, churning the customers and, what's the head count and all that kind of thing, instead of remembering that they're all flesh and blood human beings. And he said, Jeffrey Gitomer had one line, it was something like, after every sentence that you deliver to your customer, put the word grandma after it, and it's like that's our policy, grandma, or like that's not the way we do things here, grandma. It's like when you talk to a loved one, the way you talk to some customers. I think you and I genuinely do love our customers, do love the people who are our clients and choose to work with us professionally. But we must never forget that the people who we are really privileged to serve are, flesh and blood human beings with dreams and challenges and aspirations as well. And in terms of, I know we'll talk about the way that we interact with those individuals, but just recently I came across that article I shared with you, and you were telling me how you've been reading about this topic as well, about this concept that if you have 1,000 true fans, 1,000 true customers who love what you do, if you're an individual, as I am, sort of in business for myself, you can pretty much rest assured that your business will be successful because you've connected with those many people in a genuine, authentic way, a way of service. And, we'll talk a lot more about that, but I think a couple things to keep in mind is to really listen to them. We all live in such a busy, hectic lifestyle environment these days that it's so easy to just get caught up and sort of pay half attention or whatever. But if you really listen to your customers, they will tell you what they need. You'll come up with ideas of ways to serve them. You'll notice when something's missing. I was talking to somebody just recently about, the classic example these days is Zappos, and how there's no time limit to the number of, to the conversations that their phone service people have with their customers, because they're really building bonds. They're talking about the weather. They're talking about their grandchildren, all of this. And some business owner might say, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. We pay these people, by the hour, and we got to keep that churn going. But people love Zappos, and it wins, national customer service awards and whatnot. So I think that is very revealing. And in terms of listening, I think it's also helpful to listen to the words that people use. People, I love stories. It took me a long time to sort of describe what I do in a little elevator pitch, or even in a sentence and a tagline. But I think what I do is I'm a professional storyteller. When I was in the news business, I met people, would interview them on camera, that kind of thing. And it was an honor and a privilege to be able to, pass their story along to a wider audience. And I wanted to do it without, mangling their story, do it with integrity and so on. And now that I'm in public relations, again, people are trusting me with their story. And it's sort of a sacred trust to just help them become more articulate. People have sort of short attention spans these days. So again, just as people might want to talk about the awards they've won and all that stuff, they might want to want to go on and on and on. But there's value to being concise and maybe hooking their interest. How do you hook the interest of your, desired audience? And then, once you've hooked that interest, you can begin a little dialogue. They'll give you a little more space, a little more attention. But sometimes it's the words that people use. So listening and just finding out how to get on their wavelength, I think, are two important elements of that whole love your customer experience.
It's about building trust, right? So really keying into what they want and their stories, especially. The more authenticity there is in how they can share their stories, their experience, and the more you can kind of recreate that in your branding or in the PR work you can do that you're doing, the more likely that I'm sure they'll become repeat customers, right? And that's part of this as well. Also, in the nature of being an entrepreneur, the best customers are repeat customers. So if somebody you served 10 years ago or 5 years ago, if you did your job of providing them enough value, then they'll refer their friends, and they'll also likely invest in you further for other services that you're offering in the future.
Exactly. No, I totally agree with you. One author and speaker, another speaker who comes to mind as we're having this conversation is Jay Abraham, who you're probably familiar with, the marketing expert. And sometimes he's a little bit slick in terms of the lines he delivers, to make us think about things. But he one of his lines or principles is, if you're really serving your customers effectively in a way that totally satisfies them, it's almost like they owe it to their friends to tell them about you, because, if you're a mover, and it's like a friend of mine is a mover. He's like moving the third generation of families now. He's been in the business a very long time, but because every customer has had an amazing experience, no complaints in 30 or 40 years, it's almost like the people who he has served well in the past feel almost obligated to tell their friends, because would you let your friend, as Jay Abraham puts it, would you let your friends, work with somebody who's mediocre or bad? No, you think enough of your friends that when you've had a great experience, you become a walking ambassador for the person that you're paying to do a service. And so I think I think you're exactly right what you just said.
I consulted a couple of years ago with Dave Kirpin, his company called Likeable Local, and Likeable Media as well. And he's many people think of him as like a thought leader in the area of social media marketing. His latest book is called The Art of People. I remember one thing that he shared. He told me a couple of years ago is that every day, as a means of being productive, to get out of his own way, he starts with the day writing a thank you letter, a thank you note to someone in his life that he wants to send thank you to. And he'll often send it out there, but send to them that day. But in some cases, it may not make it to them, or he sends it to the wrong address. But just in the notion of actually doing that, writing that note, there's something that happens internally where when I've done this, that I've been able to get out of my own way, kind of get out of my own head. Because for me, a big part of who I am is contribution. So if I can start out my day contributing to somebody else, it's extraordinary knowing I've done that. And of course, when you receive a thank you letter in the mail, how do you feel? You feel amazing. You feel great.
Mm-hmm.
Someone actually took time to write up something very specific about how you've served them, and that's something that I've been doing also for this Valentine's Day. Also finding ways to send thank you notes to people in my life who've invested in me over the past year or more.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's great. I think, especially in this day and age, as we're emphasizing social media, technology, and email, it's almost like we're all trying to almost get away from our email. We get so much email these days. When I walk out to my mailbox here, I work from a home office. When I walk a few feet and open up my mailbox, and there's more than just bills and catalogs or something like that, there's an actual handwritten letter, a note. It stands right out, and that's a very bonding experience, certainly. I know it's kind of touchy to talk about politics, but I remember hearing years ago that the first President Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, was known for whenever he'd be on Air Force One or what have you, he would always write a number of handwritten notes to thank people that he'd met, or someone who came up to a citizen who came up with a question or concern, or maybe a staff member in some distant state or something like that. And I get the sense that Barack Obama is very much a letter writer as well. When he can find the time. And I also have heard great things about, there's a great book by Keith Ferrazzi called Never Eat Alone, which is all about different sort of networking strategies. And he has the Hall of Fame of great networkers who do it with sincerity and authenticity. And again, however you feel about politics, I think people acknowledge that Bill Clinton is a great networker. And part of it is, when he flies into a distant state and meets somebody maybe he hasn't seen in 5 or 10 years, for some reason, he can remember, the name of their child or their dog or the business they were talking about starting or something. And, a lot of us say, well, I'm bad with names. I can never remember names. But I think that by genuinely caring, our brain, this is just my theory. I can't really back it up, but I really believe that our brains have more capacity than we give credit for. And by genuinely caring to write that handwritten note, or, pay attention when, we're meeting somebody at a networking event or reception, it can stick in there, and they really do appreciate it when you care enough, that you've remembered them. That sort of gets into the whole topic of, the value of follow-up notes. A lot of the things on a lot of these points on the love your customers topic are kind of obvious and things we've probably all heard before, but so many of us don't write follow-up notes or don't follow up. We're busy, we go to a really great networking event, then we're on to the next thing. And when we do take the time to let somebody know that they're remembered, they love that. And, if you'll bear with me for another little political observation or whatever. Earlier this week, I heard Governor John Kasich. He was interviewed on CNN, and they were saying, has the process of campaigning changed you at all? And he said, yes, it has changed me, and I'll tell you how. He said, when I go to some of these town hall meetings or what have you, and someone stands up and they share a concern or a worry or maybe even something they're celebrating, he said, it's become kind of clear to me that a lot of people don't really have anybody to talk to these days. And, they want to share their concern. They want to share their feeling of celebration. And if, as business people who genuinely care about people, if we can do that, if we can fill that role, that need in people's lives, I think they really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely, Tom. And I find that in kind of connecting with people this way, it helps them to kind of, there's something about being appreciated. There's a book out there called The Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And when my wife and I, we were in the courting process, and I think even before I proposed to her, we kind of went through this book, and we found a survey online to fill out. And at the end of the survey or this test online, it actually tells you what your love languages are. And for myself, it's words of acknowledgement. That's something that connects with me, and it has for many many years. I'd say for her, it's it's quality time. So when I spend quality time with my wife, something in her gets fueled where she feels even more loved and more connected. And there are other love languages there as well, also. And I think gifts, for example, is another love language that Gary mentions. And then there are a couple more also that people listening to this can find out on. But I think in terms of human behavior, it's not just about our relationship with our significant other, but it's also with people. When people acknowledge me, for example, in different media streams or in person, or if I get a note in the mail, it really does make a difference for me. And my wife also, when she spends quality time with people, with her patients, she's a physician, um, she is able to fill in on her need to connect with people as well, also, which is something she actively does enjoys doing also. Do you have anything else to say about that?
Yeah, well, I think acknowledgement and appreciation are really key, are really so meaningful to all of us, even people who probably wouldn't acknowledge that or wouldn't admit to it. Feel touched to be appreciated. I know that sort of during my television news career, it was sort of a career of many ups and downs, with the show starting up or being canceled, or a memo coming from the stockholders board of directors saying, hey, we've got to lay off 300 people on your staff this week or something. It's kind of a brutal world of ups and downs on the behind the scenes there. And so when I've lost jobs in the past years ago, the thing that really, I never really worried, well, hey, am I going to get another paycheck somewhere, or what's going to happen, or, whatever. It was more like, I put my heart and soul into this job, and I'd like to be acknowledged or appreciated. And I think that's such a natural feeling. And I think people really feel that way. People of all ages. I mean, years ago, again, when I was working for CBS News, my mentor in those days was Charles Kuralt, who for many years hosted the show CBS Sunday Morning. And his big philosophy was that everyone has a story. And, if we travel the roads of America, we find people who are not celebrities and are not important politicians or what have you, but they all have something to say. And one of the things that he often repeated off camera and when he was meeting people and talking with me was that the best thing you'll appreciate this as a new dad. He said, the best thing any one of us can do is to tell a child, you're the very best at something, baseball or chess or art or dancing or something, and even if they're not the best, I mean, who can be the best? Mm-hmm. Just even at the earliest ages, there's something in the human spirit that like really appreciates that. I'm being singled out. I'm being noticed. Somebody cares. And I think we never lose that feeling, however old we may get.
Exactly. I absolutely agree. Especially as a child, be acknowledged that way, how that carries forward. Absolutely. Just to be loved that way.
Yes.
Awesome. Really great. And you mentioned before, I find one of the challenges these days is I think Dan Sullivan shared this the best with me a number of years ago. It's the whole nature of Moore's law, that the amount of information that we receive each year doubles from the previous year. And there's so much out there, and we talked about receiving letters in the mail and how years ago when email was first introduced back in the 90s, where it started getting popularity, getting an email was a great thing, and that was like, okay, well, I'm getting an email now. This totally beats getting letters in the mail. And how now we're kind of shifting back to how things used to be, basically personalized mail, and also perhaps even bulky mail and gifts that come in the mail too also tend to be very much appreciated. I just find all that really fascinating and very important also, especially when it comes to engaging customers and to be remembered also in their eyes too. There's a book out
Yes.
there that myself and my power team co-organizer Frank Clark talk about. It's called Karmic Management. And there's another book, very similar name, probably a little more popular, by Bob Berg, called The Go Giver. You may have heard about this. And
Yes.
in The Go Giver, Bob shares a story about a gentleman going through life and building a business and the challenges that come from building a business. And the, the theme of the book is about giving. It's really about finding a means to serve your customers in the most easiest, effective way. It could be writing a blog article, perhaps, where you get to acknowledge people, where you're sharing, or it could be a matter of engaging them in an audience, perhaps, and providing value. But basically, it's finding a way to give back to your customers in whatever way connects with them the most, right? And it is kind of much what you mentioned before, the law of reciprocity. As you kind of give, they give back to you as well, also, and together we can all thrive. The
Yeah,
community that
absolutely.
I organize, and Tom, you're familiar with this also, is called PeerMomentum. And PeerMomentum is a mastermind community where we connect entrepreneurs together, put them into like a bit of an incubator for 3 months. And we encourage these entrepreneurs to share their victories, their courageous actions, how they're growing essentially, and really taking on that momentum as they share that inspires others at the same time to share too. And the interesting thing I found in this community, which you're familiar with, you're a member of
Hmm.
as well, that
Hmm.
so much generosity in there. There's so many people that are willing to give of themselves to help others. So we actually added a bartering element to this community recently, just because there's so much giving in this community as well. Um, but the one thing that stands out with all the giving is just the raw authenticity. When you can trust somebody that you're engaging with, and when you know that they've got your back, very, very, very much aligned with another one of Keith Rice's book called "Who's Got Your Back." When you know that people have got your back, they'll do whatever they can to take care of you, to take care of your needs, and ensure that you're succeeding. And that's just something that really stands out also in my own childhood too as well. When I was growing up in Queens, my dad, in our family in Elmhurst, Queens, growing up, my dad would invite one of his siblings from India to the United States, and they would live with us. And I'd see his brother, for example, one of his brothers, I'd see them start taking the steps toward getting a job, toward finding the love of their life, getting married. And I'd see this whole evolution over the course of 3 years with one sibling. And then after that sibling moved on, he'd invite somebody else into our home. And so throughout the course of 20, 30 years, I got to witness someone like maybe dozens of people come and thrive this way. Family members, friends, and things of that sort thrive that way through this model. And my dad would encourage us to look at business the same way too. Also, we go to Lancaster, Pennsylvania each year on the dot, Memorial Day, and he'd have us also look at others doing the same thing. Like the Amish, they're doing this concept called barn raising, where they all come together. They help um, another farmer in need build a barn up, and he had me see at an early age that that's exactly what we're doing. And that's for the most part that's our goal in the world, is to survive, to thrive as people, not just as entrepreneurs, is to find ways to do that for others too at the same time.
Exactly. No, it's great how that's a universal feeling. I mean, from your heritage in India to the Pennsylvania Dutch Amish. I think it's really true. For some reason, as you were talking, it reminded me of, I was telling a friend recently about a course I took many years ago in transcendental meditation, learning how to meditate, and the way that the instructor of this sort of weekend course laid it out for me. I don't know, sort of following the Maharishi's teachings and whatnot, is that, it's like you're walking along, the thoughts that may come into your head when you're meditating, it's like somebody walking on the same sidewalk alongside of you, and you never know when they may drift off, they'll turn the corner, their journey may join you in the middle and continue for a short while, a long while, we never really know. But I sort of feel like being of service like that, and it sort of sounded like, that story about how your relatives helped get their footing in this country was similar also. There's some great satisfaction in being of service, and you never know how long that process may continue with that particular person, but it's just being of service in general that's very fulfilling. I mean, it may sound kind of silly, but it's like every day when I wake up, I think, wow, I have another opportunity to meet some new people, hear some new ideas. Perhaps some of the people I was, very involved with years ago have sort of drifted off in their own directions. That happens in life. But, there's always people coming together, and just that intersection of ideas and support for one another is pretty magical and inspiring. And I think, again, now that we're in this, high-tech age, social media age, when it can be very personalized like that, it's very memorable because not everybody's doing it that way. Not everybody appreciates those opportunities the way that, that you and I do. And I'm guessing the people following this conversation.
Exactly. It's so easy to get lost in the clutter.
Yes.
And especially with the amount of information that's coming out our way. Someone actually shared with me a strategy, something I'm looking at taking up myself recently, and that is simply creating like a vision board. And on the vision board, putting the people in your life that really do matter to you, your customers, your mentors, just having them all there on that vision board. And the means of doing this is that it kind of keeps it in existence. So each time you pass by this board, or it could be a mind map, it's another way of doing it, you're really present to who those people are, because it's so easy with, that information we mentioned before, to kind of overlook who those people are, the people we care for, our family, our friends, our clients. And so I'm looking at actually taking this on myself as a activity over the next couple of weeks.
It's a great idea. And it's, that also brings to mind for me, the fact that what we're talking about here, it's not, some people, I don't know, perhaps more cynical people who had stumbled upon this conversation might say, why bother? What does that have to do with growing a business? Although I think delivering, really caring about your customers is good business, does lead to successful business. But I think that, by caring and by taking the time to acknowledge people, it is just good business. It's, again, the thank you notes. It's sort of in my nature after all these years to, if I come across an interesting article or think of somebody that might be a good connection with someone else, and it doesn't even mean, closing a sale or something like that, but just that there could be good synergy between two people I know, who do not know one another. I love, taking that minute to make that, send that little introduction email, send a link to that article or video or what have you. And people really appreciate that, because apparently not everybody takes the time to do that. And when you do things like that, the people that you're reaching out to know that you're thinking of them. I mean, by the very nature of the act, you're thinking of them. And as we were discussing earlier, people like to be appreciated, and if you're giving them that indication, I think it does open the door to business, which is certainly welcome also.
Yeah, and even if only 10% of people take an action with that shared message that you've given them, it's still an action that probably wouldn't have happened if it weren't for you're willing to connect them. And in the process of that, you become a catalyst for so much growth and for people to to shift. And the world belongs to connectors, right? That's something that I really do believe in, especially in this day and age. You've got to be a connector in order to succeed and thrive in this world, especially as an entrepreneur, where there's so many entrepreneurs out there who are just failing out there.
I think there's a big feeling of overwhelm for so many people these days, as you said earlier, with the doubling of knowledge, almost on a daily basis. It can be incredibly overwhelming. And so if there's somebody out there, or a group of people, a number of people who care about you and are looking out for business opportunities for you and making sure everything is moving forward in the way that you're envisioning, in this overwhelming world, what can be better than that, really?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, we're going to open the call to questions. If anyone has any questions on this Blab chat, I see about 15 people there. So let us know how we can serve you, or if you have any points about sharing the love with your customers, the theme of this call. Let us know. So I'll put that out there. And of course, we'll keep talking, Tom. Tom, any other ideas, strategies, anything else you want to share with us, the audience, about loving customers more?
Well, I think I would just encourage people to always look for ways they can go, the extra yard, the extra mile. I think sort of a classic story about the start of Federal Express. And again, I don't know whether this is necessarily a true story, but if it's not, as someone once said, if it's not a true story, it should be. How someone in the early days when FedEx was just starting up, a lady was in need of her wedding dress. It was like needed it, that next day or something like that. And so I'm sure at great expense, given the cost of, chartering those airplanes, the much needed wedding dress did make it in time for the wedding. And, people who do that kind of thing, whether it's a large business or individuals, they're really appreciated. As you know, I love writing a weekly newsletter where I share ideas about the media and how to get your message out and that kind of thing. And in the newsletter that I wrote most recently was sort of the Valentine's Day edition. And a friend of mine here in my town, Ridgefield, Connecticut, Pam, introduced me to her former boss, Jack Mitchell, who owns a couple, upscale men's clothing stores. And a few years ago, he wrote a book called "Hug Your Customers." And he said, "Well, you don't literally have to hug your customers. Maybe not everybody's comfortable hugging your customers, but the fact is," he said, to a literal degree, if somebody was a certain size or like needed a certain looking jacket for a business meeting or something that day, or you never know what kind of emergencies might pop up in that apparel world, he would literally give them the jacket off his back. Or if somebody was on the way to the airport and then realized they were in a bind for whatever reason, granted men's clothing sales is not like surgery or something like that. But when people had what they considered an emergency, he would open up, even if the store was closed and stuff like that. And people remember those gestures that you went to some trouble for them. And sort of along the same lines, I'm reminded of some things that Gary Vaynerchuk, the social media expert and author, has said. I'm always amazed at how often he replies to people who reach out to him by Twitter. He's a best-selling author now. Thousands of people, follow his work. But and I don't know if he literally replies to everyone, but especially when he was starting out and growing his fame as a social media expert. And I think he was still probably helping part-time at his parents' wine shop in New Jersey, the Russian immigrants who bought a wine shop in New Jersey. And so if somebody needed a special delivery of a case of wine because the party was that night and something had fallen through, even though he's this big, successful author, he would show up on their doorstep, "Here's your case of wine," and that kind of thing. And again, probably for viewers of this conversation who are very successful, maybe a best-selling author or CEO of their own company or something, I would definitely encourage those people to not forget that the touch, it's like in customer, when they are teaching customer relations in MBA programs or whatever, they talk about the number of touch points and that kind of thing. But I think that if you're, the more successful you are, the more you make time to really care about people or, help them out in a way that might surprise them. I think people really appreciate that, and that really bonds them to you for a very long time.
Absolutely, so. Absolutely. I knew some of my clients over the years, when I've come in to meet my clients, I made it a point to also just connect with the staff there, like the secretaries, the door greeters, the gatekeepers there. And that really does make such a difference. It's not just the decision makers, not just the executive CEO of these companies, but it's also the people along the way that you engage with. Because you know what, when you walk away, they're the ones talking about you with their boss. They're the ones saying that, hey, Joseph came in or Tom came in or, and they really like this person walked in here and they were congruent all the way through with how they showed up. It wasn't just
exactly
putting on a mask as he walked into the door, meeting the executive. It was really showing up powerfully every step of the way and really being that generous, eye contact, acknowledgement, perhaps even a thank you gift to that person. And I will say that for the past like 5-6 years, every time I've done this, walked into a client's office and also walked out, came back with like a thank you card for the secretary or the leader, the executive, I've always gotten touch back. I've always gotten value back from doing that, especially as that relationship started started growing afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah. For about 10 or 12 years now, I've known a number of people who worked closely with Oprah Winfrey, for example. And when we've tried to get word to Oprah about different projects, I mean, I was working for a while with one client who collected historic African American memorabilia, signed documents, from the Civil War era, and various things like that. And he was looking for somebody who might be interested in purchasing this collection that he'd spent a lifetime putting together, and thought, well, Oprah would be a good candidate, perhaps. And so Oprah, at least in the days when she hosted her, well-known afternoon or daily talk show, she, almost like the president, she had a chief of staff. So I forget the chief of staff's name, but again, a couple of my friends, knew this lady. They knew Oprah herself, of course, but they knew that this is not someone to just be sort of brushed aside. Like, people are so excited to meet Oprah or connect with Oprah, it's almost like, get out of the way, chief of staff. But when people did appreciate her, or included her in conversation, or see what she thought about things, she really appreciated it. And being, so close to the seat of power in that particular world, she was a smart person with lots of experience and lots of ideas also. So it's not like this is just a person to be brushed aside. So I think your comment is very, very well put there.
One of my clients a couple of years ago, one of the admin in his office, and he had a staff of about 8 or 9 people. She did the bookkeeping at the office too, as well. And I would go to the office and actually had a desk there where I do my work, my consulting at that point. And I always made it a point to be very generous to everyone that was there. But at some point, maybe about weeks into this consulting session, I found out that this admin person was his wife. And I think in the nature of small businesses, you'll find more about these days, where family are more involved with these businesses. So you never know what the relationship is with the people there in their office with the founders of these organizations. There's a lot more of that these days.
That's a good point. No, it's funny. This may I hope this doesn't come off as a sexist remark, but I know that you're familiar with Jim Rohn, who passed away a couple years ago after a long speaking career, and he was Tony Robbins' mentor and inspired many people in that personal development world. He has so many great lines. We had one line about how in a business meeting, or if there's a negotiation to be conducted and it's just a bunch of men, he would say, bring a lady from the office. It doesn't, these days it can be a president or, vice president of the corporation. It doesn't have to be a secretary. But Jim Rohn always said that women are more sensitive to emotions and more perceptive, and that the things that guys like us might miss or not even see, a lady could say, well, that seems like kind of a mean person, or I don't really trust that person, or something like that. And so I think you're exactly right as far as not taking anybody who's part of the picture for granted, because not only is it inappropriate to sort of brush people off or not take them seriously, but you never know what role they might play in the overall picture.
Great, Tom. Any other points? Anything else you feel would add value to this conversation? Loving your customers?
Really, just I think, as we've said a couple of times in this conversation, it's really worthwhile to remember how we can serve others. Another instance in which that lesson was driven home to me was during a few years when I was producing stories for ABC Good Morning America, and we had a wonderful, very hardworking, very detail-oriented executive producer, Shelley Ross, and we would have an afternoon story idea meeting every day before the next morning show, getting ready for the next show. And there were, in a 2-hour show, they probably have about 16 segments, not including the commercials. And so Shelley Ross would say, for each of those segments, like, think about always keep in mind the audience is sitting at home asking one question: what's in it for me? It doesn't mean they're being selfish or not caring about others, but like we've been saying, in this conversation, that we live in a world of overwhelm and a million things competing for our attention. And so if you're designing a message, or if I'm writing a press release or something like that, or we're trying to, hook somebody's interest for possible sale. Always remember what's in it. They're asking that question in the back of their mind. Hey, I live in a busy world. I've got a million things on my mind. How does this really relate to me, or how can this make a difference in my life? And for every segment that I coach my clients on in terms of how to make a great presentation from a PR perspective, it's not talking about how great I am, and like I said earlier, the awards I've won, or name dropping or anything like that. But it's more, think of the people out there and how can I make a difference in their life. And I think if you do that in a very sincere, authentic, dedicated way, like you said, perhaps through the law of reciprocity, it does come back and lead to great business.
Great, well said, Tom. It's very much about knowing who your audience is, who's actually listening to you, who might be in the audience, and being able to speak to them, to their listening.
Yes.
And I've heard that before also. The most popular radio station out there is WIIFM.
It's the way the world works, exactly. And maybe, as we're saying, in a world where so many people feel that they're not really being listened to, or being underappreciated and that kind of thing. Maybe that's sort of a natural defense mechanism where people have to step up a little bit more to make sure that their interests are being looked out for. It's not that they're greedy or whatever. And so if we can help that, that process, and let them know, we are thinking of you, we are looking out for you, you're included, they really appreciate it.
Awesome. It's really, really great. Does anyone have questions for us? Anybody else in the chat have questions or points they want to talk about as far as building connections, sending out love to your clients, to your customers?
And Joseph, I don't know, would it be okay to give my email address? I mean, if anyone is watching this at a future date or whatever.
How can people contact you?
Yeah, sure. If anyone's listening to this interview and have a question or a thought you'd like to share, I love hearing from people, especially on this topic and on the whole idea of reaching a wider audience. It's Tom at Tom Martin Media, TomMartinmedia.com. And Joseph, if you want to tell people how to reach you as well.
Yeah, and Tom, can you put that in chat as well? Your site?
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. And for everyone else out there, you can reach me. You can go to jvny.com. Those as in my initials, jvny.com, 4 letters. It'll connect you with what I do. And each month I organize Near Power Team. We're the largest person development and leadership community in New York, in that we meet monthly. It's a lot of fun. So we come to our events. I also organize accountability circles called Success Circles. And last year I've had a lot of fun launching these mastermind communities called PeerMomentum. So you'll be able to hear a lot more about that soon. It's just something I'm very passionate about, the whole idea, nature of people helping each other reach their goals.
That's great. Well, and those are all great programs, by the way. I participate in all of them. So you do great work, Joseph. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Tom. Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions that people have here. And this is a great topic, Tom. So we'll definitely make it a point to reconnect again about this topic and other topics, because it is really all about customers in this world. So I know you and I are very like people, very passionate about this. So I'm sure we can talk about this for hours and hours. So
exactly.
We'll make sure we do this again sometime soon.
Excellent. Well, thanks for inviting me. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thanks again.
Likewise, Tom. Have a great day.
You too.